1970, I co-wrote a script with my then writing partner, Clifton Rolke, called The Jacket. That film was eventually produced in 2005 by Warner Brothers and Mandalay Pictures. The reason why it took so long is another story in itself, but not for this video. The basic story of The Jacket came from a book written by Jack London called The Star Rover. And in that story that Jack London wrote, the leading character strips out of his body because he's in a dangerous situation in his life, and he strips out of his body, and he basically ends up living in the universe alternately in an altered life. He comes and goes from his body, and he's essentially living the secret life of Walter Mitty. Every episode is different. They're not really connected. And it was an interesting story, but I wanted to connect all the astral projection, the alternate universe, the ultra life throughout the script, and make it, be an important factor as to how the story ends. So that was a huge difference. One of the reasons, the main reason why I was so fascinated by London's book is because I've always been fascinated with the phenomena of sleep. I've never understood it. There are elements of it that make little sense to me. If you think about it, if you live to be 90 years old, you've slept for 30 years. That's a lot of maintenance. If you ask somebody why you sleep, they'll say, well, you need to regenerate your body, you need to recoup your body, you need to rest so your body can recoup. I don't agree with that. I mean, when you're sleeping, nothing really stops. Your heart goes on beating, blood goes on circulating, your lungs are operating, your body's exchanging gases, your brain is still functioning, you're dreaming, your muscles still work, you're turning in bed. If you've eaten food, your food is digesting. I mean, what is it it'd be one thing if your body just completely shut off for 8 hours, I guess. But even then, it makes little sense to me. I mean, the body is a very complex, is a phenomenal, for lack of a better wording, is a phenomenal piece of machinery. Why does it need all that maintenance? I mean, I can drive a car from coast to coast and back and never turn the engine off. The drive would take me probably 10 days, to drive coast to coast. I have to have somebody else with me to share the driving, but I don't have to turn that engine off every 16 hours. If you think about it, every human being has to stop whatever they're doing every 16 hours of their working day and lay down, close their eyes, and drop into a semi-coma for 8 hours. Every revolution of Earth, every 24 hours, no matter where you are on Earth, you have to lay down and close your eyes and drop into this semi-coma. You cannot store up on sleep. You can't say, well, I've got a really hard work schedule, so I'm not going to sleep for 3 days, and then I'm going to sleep for a full day. You can't do that. You have to, every 16 hours, you've got to shut it down. Every one revolution of Earth. And if you stop someone from sleeping, we know from world history and science that if you stop somebody from sleeping, it's a torture. It's right up there with waterboarding. If you shake someone every time they're about to fall asleep, or you pull them out of REM sleep every time they're in REM sleep, they'll lose their mind. I mean, and so it's not something to play with. It is literally etched in stone. Every 24 hours you have to lay down for 8 hours and drop out into this semi-coma. That's fascinating to me. I read a book by John Bigelow years ago. I was fascinated by it because John Bigelow was thinking along these same lines. The book is over 100 years old. It's available on Amazon. I think it's called The Mysteries of Sleep. It's a big book. Bigelow was a Norwegian, a brilliant man, and he equated the need for sleep with a religious element, which I found fascinating. If you think about it, there's in the Bible, God brought sleep over people whenever He needed to talk with them. There's many examples of this, and usually in an emergency, dire situation. Probably the best example is Joseph, Mary and Joseph, when he brought sleep over Joseph so the angel could come and direct Joseph to flee to Egypt. There's many examples of this in the Bible, but the notion of God bringing sleep over someone to actually communicate them, to communicate with them one-on-one, is very prevalent in the Bible, and I find that fascinating. The reason is because I've never really thought it was fair the way the system of judgment, life, what we do, and the final judgment, everything is fair, because there's not a fairness to how many people receive religious information and spiritual information. By way of example, if you take a kid in the ghetto, 14 years old, 16 years old, whatever, he has his education is of an 8th grade level. He's working the street to help support his family. He can hardly read. His reading level is really very low. If you give him the Bible and say, here, you read this and this is all you need to know, and based on what you read and what your actions are for throughout your life and what you do is going to determine whether you go to heaven or hell. Now understand that there's a ways that you can get into heaven even after you're dead if you haven't given your life to Jesus, and that's another video. But that kid does not have the same opportunity that Franklin Graham has, for instance, the son of Billy Graham. The son of Billy Graham has it way over that kid when it comes to spiritual and religious teaching throughout his life. I mean, he's got a leg up on this kid. So when those two arrive in the judgment day, I don't think it's fair that this kid that grew up in the ghetto has the same life experience religion-wise that Franklin Graham had. Unless, of course, that's not what's happening. John Bigelow, I agreed with what he was proposing. He was saying that essentially that when we sleep, or at least he alludes to this, that when we sleep, we literally leave our bodies and we go into a spirit world where we actually commune with God on a daily basis. The Lord's Prayer says that give us our daily bread. The bread referred to in the Bible, as my understanding, is not physical bread. It's a spiritual bread. It's our spiritual teaching. It's a daily teaching. And so I think it's an interesting concept, theory, idea, that if when we sleep, that we literally leave our body and go into a spirit world where we commune with God on a daily basis. In other words, we can go into the spirit world and meet with God and commune with God, or angels, or whatever it is we're meeting with in the spiritual world, where we go over what we did in the prior day and what we plan to do in the next day when we awaken. God can then present His will for us. We present our free will, and based on God's plan and our will, what we want to do, God allows us to make the decisions of what we do with our life, but with His counseling. I think that's fair, because that means that we are spiritually counseled that we make up our own decisions, and we do this on a daily basis throughout our life. Give us our daily bread. A counseling on a daily basis, spiritually, no matter where we are in the world. It doesn't matter what age we are. If we were to take that concept of sleep and regeneration, it's backwards, isn't it? Because if we're really using sleep to regenerate our body because of toxins and all of that, and our body is overworked and so forth, then babies would need very little sleep. I mean, they have a Rolls-Royce body, don't they? They don't have any toxins at all to speak of. Now, they have cell division, that's true, they're growing. But adults have cell division and are replacing cells all the time. And science says that we completely replace our entire body with the exception of our brain every 7 years. And so if the regeneration of the body theory is workable, then babies would need very little sleep and old people would be sleeping all the time. I remember my grandmother when she was in her 70s, she'd be up at the crack of dawn doing all kinds of things. I'd be sleeping and she'd be up doing all kinds. She needed very little sleep, compared to me. And perhaps the reason that is because a baby, an infant, a child, has no spiritual input at all. They have a blank slate. They have a clean slate. They have a blank hard drive. They need more counseling than an adult does because the world to them is a scary place. And so an infant, a child, needs a lot more spiritual counseling than does an adult. When you get near the end of your life, I suppose you need very little. Now, of course, when you're very old and you're in the final stages of dying, you sleep a lot, and that's because your organs are shutting down. But it makes sense to me why children and babies sleep so long, and old people tend to get by on a lot less sleep. You think it'd be backward, it would be reversed because of the state of the human body if the regeneration theory works. Another aspect of this concept that I find interesting is the phenomena that happens when, and it's happened to me, and I know it's happened to others. You go to sleep at night and you're very angry with someone. And then when you awaken, you're not angry with them anymore. For some strange reason, whatever was bothering you about them isn't bothering you anymore. And perhaps you call on the phone and say, look, I've given this a lot of thought, and how silly that this has happened, and let's, why don't we have lunch? And the other fellow says, yeah, it wasn't silly that what we did. It's not that big of a deal, and I've been thinking about it myself, and how did that happen? Is it possible that they met in the spirit world and they worked it out there, and then when they the next day they didn't feel the same way? Many of us have had friends that men and women whose spouses, the person comes to us and says, I think my wife or I think my husband's having an affair. And you say, why do you think that? And they say, I don't know. I don't know why. There's not anything they're doing. It's not emails or tricky phone calls or cell phone or none of that. They are not coming home with lipstick or perfume. All the telltale signs that we hear about and seen in the movies. None of that. But I have this feeling inside, this gut feeling and intuition. Something's telling me that they're having an affair. And I don't know what it is. Is it possible that they know about it because they've discovered about it in the spirit world? Man and wife sleep together, right next to each other normally, so you think when they sleep at night, they're both in the spirit world together. It's interesting because if this idea of daily counseling in the spirit world is in full truth, I think that's why it may be why human beings have a natural inclination to tell the truth, to do the right thing is because of this daily spirit communion with God. It really eliminates the whole idea of lying, doesn't it? Because if this is really true, then nobody gets away with lying. They get away with it for a while, but everybody knows they're lying, or the important people know that they're lying because they find out about it in the spirit world. Maybe. It's interesting, isn't it? In addition to working out things in sleep that work out to a positive nature, I think that it's possible that the people who are having difficulty getting to sleep may be having this problem because they know intuitively what's awaiting for them or what's awaiting them in this spiritual world, and they just don't want to go there. Maybe that's why people who are having trouble sleeping, when they're going through difficult times, or they have a lot of guilt on their mind, or they have a lot of things that they're not working out properly, and they know they're not working them out properly, they have difficulty falling asleep. They say, they'll say, well, I've had so much on my mind, I just can't sleep. And maybe it's because they just don't want to sleep. Is that possible? Maybe. That they know that the minute they fall asleep, that they're going to end up in that spirit world, and they just don't want to go there. They don't want to deal with it. Possibly. And finally, one of the areas that John Bigelow mentions in his book, and it's something that never occurred to me, and I wondered about it. I often would think, when I would be thinking about sleep and all that, is why would God do this? Why would our Creator set this up this way? That every 24 hours that we have to go to the spirit world. Why is that set up the way it is? And Bigelow had an answer for me that I think that worked to my satisfaction. He says in his book, the reason that God does this is because when we sleep, it is the only time that God has our undivided attention. That in our waking life, in the physical world, we are so distracted with so many things that it's impossible for God to really commune with us. And our distractions over the years are now, 100-fold what they were 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. And so, but what hasn't changed is sleep. The same idea of sleep is the same now as it was 2,000 years ago. And so it's the only time that God has our undivided attention. And I think that's true. Even when I was doing meditation, I did transcendental meditations and other meditations, and even prayer. When I've prayed, I don't have my full attention on what I'm praying about and what I'm in my meditation. There's other things going on. Maybe 60% there, 70%. Maybe there are people, I'm sure there are people that are 100% into that meditation and their prayer. I have not been able to achieve that. There's always something going on back here in my mind. But when I sleep, if it's true that God has my total undivided attention, with the total loss of my ego, by the way, because that's gone. I'm living in full truth. That would make sense. Otherwise, God does not have my undivided attention, and God should, if we're talking about His will and my will and how I'm going to live my life. So I put all that out there, and I look forward to comments. This series I've been with me for many, many years, but I know I'm just probably just scratching the surface. I'm not an authority or scientist or any of that. The thoughts that I've had. So I welcome your comments. I truly welcome your comments.